And as a result of me spending a little time with Julia, she asked me if I would come and spend a little time with you all. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted to be here. I don't know much about the culture or operating system of your group, so I ask your patience and forgiveness right off the bat. So I loved being on the call last time. I liked people in breakout rooms talking, and I like the fact that it's not just a short hour too. It's hard to get into things in an hour. It seems like most of these discussion things are an hour long. So I appreciated the extra time and people's thoughtfulness. So I'm looking forward to a great conversation last time. I never know quite what to say. I talked to a lot of different groups and the cultures are all different, but Dan is a little familiar with you all. And I've known Dan for a lot of years, a decade now. So I wanted to give him a chance at 7 in the morning to just, Dan, how would you introduce me to this group? What would be helpful for them to know and for me to know about them?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, so as Bruce mentioned, we've been friends for many years now, and I've had the pleasure of watching his career kind of shift and change over the last maybe especially 10 years in service of taking his gift work out into the world. And I don't know anyone whose heart is more into wanting to help change the world and change how people view themselves and how they show up in the world, and how being connected to our individual gifts is so important to, finding a sense of purpose and working together in all kinds of contexts. In addition to starting the Core Gift Institute and doing trainings for, I don't know how many thousands of people at this point, Bruce also goes on treks with young adults to Europe and other places where they focus on their gifts, their gift work in the evenings after they're going through their treks during the day. And it's a very rich program for those young adults as well. He is tireless in sharing his work and sharing his passion. And I don't know what else there is to say about him. He's an amazing guy, and I love him to death. And Bruce, it's been about a year since I've been on a call here, but I just remember this as being such a very rich group, and the conversation's very deep and expansive. So I look forward to the conversation.
Great. So I would like to, thanks, Dan, I appreciate that. I'd like to just tell you a short story about how I got into this idea of gifts originally. And then maybe we could, Ilse can put us in breakout rooms just for you to talk about what your impressions are of that word gifts and how it has influenced or not influenced you in your own life and what you've learned about it so far. But I want to start with a bit of a story because it's the reason why I showed up today. I got involved with 4 or 5 men in a group that was, I didn't start it, I joined it after it was going. It was a group of men who were frustrated by the difficulty of connecting with gang-affiliated young men in the United States, and not just gang-affiliated, but mostly gang-affiliated, and some men young men who were just having real difficulty finding their way in the world. Many had been incarcerated, almost all of them had seen friends shot and killed. This is about 20 years ago. And so I joined up, and we would go to these remote camps up long gravel roads where we knew none of the young people would want to bother trying to walk out and escape, and run down places where things could kind of get beat up and destroyed. And they were just awful. It was a rough start. It was a bunch of older guys trying to transform younger guys, and they were having none of it. And over time, we realized that the problem might not be the younger guys. The problem might be us older people. And so we started trying to analyze what was working, and we found two things that really worked, that really seemed to spark deep change in young people. And one of them is, if you build a big enough fire, any young guy will come to it. Doesn't matter how resistant or how unwanting to engage, they'll come to a fire. They're burning up inside. And if you just keep throwing logs on it, they will show up eventually. So that was one thing we figured out that worked. And the other thing we figured out that worked is, during breaks in our conversation, if you were walking along with a young guy and you didn't mention getting a job or reconnecting with your family or staying out of prison or going to school, if you didn't mention any of those things, but just got right in the young guy's face and said something like, 3 of your friends have been shot. Why do you even bother to get up in the morning? What's the freaking point of all of this? Most young guys would respond to that. And we realized over time that that was a conversation about life purpose at its core. Underneath all the stuff, it was a, how come are you in this world? And anybody in serious trouble asks themselves that question eventually. When times get tough enough, that's the foundational question people eventually ask: why? And so we realized that worked. About that time, our family, but more specifically my wife, gave birth. And on the day she gave birth, we discovered a lump in her breast, and she went into the cancer center 4 hours after our son was born and had a needle biopsy and discovered she had breast cancer. And the result of that was a few weeks. They gave her a few weeks to breastfeed, and then she had a mastectomy and did all the treatments, and she got a serious interest in life-threatening illnesses. Our family did. But out of that, she's a process lover like I am. She began to gather women who were dying in our living room for 4 or 5 days. And I would leave with the kids and go somewhere, and she would meet with them. And one day, I got back from a young person event that I was describing to you. And one of her events was ending in our living room. The grandmother had our kids, and we were eating. I remember we were eating spaghetti, and I said, Gina, it's really interesting. We figured out if that fire, we can get young men to come to fire, and if we avoid all the usual you should questions and had more accidental, purposeful conversations, why are you in the world, during our breaks, that they would respond. And she said, well, that's really interesting, because I've done a number of these events now, and at the end of every event, I asked the women to talk about over that 3 days what the most meaningful part of the time had been for them. And she said, every time it's the same thing with every woman, that they always say the most valuable time during the 3 days is the time where everybody listened to them carefully talk about why they thought they'd been in the world. Why have I been in this world? And I realized that at that moment, and Gina realized, that there's young men coming into the world in serious trouble, and their most foundational question is, why am I in the world? And Gina is working with women leaving this world, and their most valued conversation is why was I in the world? And so we saw life as an arc of trying to answer that question. And it changed both of our lives. I was doing other things. I was doing a lot of strategic planning and organizational development stuff, and just a lot of organizational things. And Gina had been working by my side for 20 years, doing that work, and had her own kind of brand of that work. And both of us shifted. She went back and got a doctorate in pastoral counseling and is doing a lot of kind of spiritual coaching with people now. And I headed off into this world of gifts. And it's been a 20-year search for us. And one of the first things that we noticed along that way was we could find almost no processes. I couldn't find an organization, a location, an assessment tool that really helps someone in a reasonable period of time develop a clarifying statement about why they thought they were in the world. What we discovered was the tools that were available and are still available identify clusters of things in, for instance, in Alistair. Hi, Alistair, I remember you from last time. Alistair answers a bunch of questions, and then his answers are compared to a database of 10,000 people. And they say, well, based on your answers, Alistair, and our research, this is who you are. And they assign usually a batch of qualities. That's how Strength Finders is designed. It's how personality tests are designed. They identify clusters. They basically tell you how you're like other people. And what we were looking for was a tool that did exactly the opposite, that said, Alistair, how are you unlike everybody else in the world? Because that's the idea of the gift. It's a kind of uniqueness that is not replicated by any other human. How are you absolutely distinct? And so we set about trying to design a tool 20 years ago that would do that through a conversation process. And it's been a long road. But we have been diligently on it, and we've developed this tool, and it works. We use it with students in high schools. It's being used today in Los Angeles with people in alleyways who are actively doing substances and living in alleys and have diagnosed mental illness. It's used all over the world in lots of different situations. And so we're pretty keen on it. It's not perfect, but we haven't discovered anything that does what this tool does. We've been looking all over and we can't seem to find anything. We keep hoping, but we can't seem to find anything. So my work has really been about spreading the idea of gifts around and all the misunderstandings that happen in the world, or happen in this world when people try and understand gifts, and also training practitioners, coaches, and preachers and employment counselors, people of all kind of shapes and sizes who want to help someone start with the idea, not of what's your issue and how are we going to solve it, but answer the most basic question first. Why are you in the world? And after that, get to the questions of what you would like to change about your life. And the last thing I would say is, in the American Psychological Association, there's more than 450 certified therapeutic processes. Not a single one of them use the word gift, not a single one. It's completely eliminated out of psychological practice in terms of the professional associations in the United States. And yet, if you go back a few hundred years and all of the ancestries represented on the screen, the word gift or a word like it was dominant in the understanding of the culture. And so we're trying to recapture something rather than invent something new. So I guess that's what I would say. So maybe somebody is echoing a lot here. All of a sudden, I'm Ilsa. It's not a bad thing. I wouldn't mind the transformation, Ilsa. Now you're Lucille.
Let's just say it's a gift.
It is a gift. It's a gift. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought maybe what we could do is do a little breakout room stuff, Ilsa. I mean, I guess the questions are, what's your understanding of that word gift so far in your life? And is it, do you use it any way in your professional practice or in your personal life and surroundings? And just what do you know so far? Just to share a little bit of wisdom back and forth. So Ilse, maybe you could get 4 people to a room, and in 15 minutes ought to be enough time. Who else? What'd you hear that was interesting, or what'd you think of that was interesting to you?
So if I can go, Bruce.
You bet.
I had the privilege of being with Dan, who's been doing a lot of this work. And what I found really interesting was getting to the gift involves really going into what wound the person has kind of transmuted. Well, that's the kind of language I use, and how they're going to bring the depth of their being that's been forged through that into the world. And that's not exactly the language Dan used. That's my kind of language, epic language of, you know, people go through hell and then they teach what they learned in getting through it. So, I liked that coming in as part of your gift is what you've like wrestled from your suffering.
Yeah. I like the design of that, because if you're, well, I'll define gifts a little bit more carefully. You're really talking about one particular kind of gift, I think, Ingrid, a passage or initiation or threshold gift. And it's the most potent gift, because your psyche says every time you go out and give that gift, you not only give something to somebody else, but you heal yourself. So it's the only gift that has reciprocity built into it. So our psyche wants to keep doing it over and over and over again, because we sense that the more we give it, the more we heal. So if you really want to motivate someone and you know that passage gift, people will give it in situations that are life-threatening. They can't not do it, because their psyche says you have to go for that. You just have to go for that.
Wow,
So,
that is really profound and beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing about the other types of gifts if you've named them with such clarity.
Yeah, we could do that. Maybe I'll do that right now, just so it's not the only frame in the world, but it's the frame that we've found useful after investigating and looking in different kinds of cultures. Maybe I'll share just let me share a couple of slides here. So I've got 5 or 6 slides. I'll just go through them fairly quickly here, just so you have an umbrella, a balcony view of our frame on the idea of gifts. So the first thing to realize is that what's fundamentally happened as industrialized cultures are hell-bent on taking over the world, is that the undertone of that is that life purpose, which has been dominant in all cultures, has been replaced with the idea of strengths. And what that does is, it's not like there's been an evil plan, but it prepares people to be part of the machine. Because if you don't have, I heard a young gang affiliated youth say to another young person, if you don't know who you are, people can do whatever they want with you. And so Ingrid, if you're a collection of strengths, but you're not sure of your life purpose, then I have more of a capacity to motivate you towards my needs rather than yours. So a supervisor in an auto manufacturing plant doesn't really care what your core gift is or any of your gifts. They want you to be able to pick up the screwdriver, put the headlight ring in a fast enough way that the next person on the assembly line can do their task. And so the world revolves around efficiencies and strengths rather than gifts. So there's a lot of words for capacity and people, and we've intentionally chosen the word gift or its equivalent in different cultures around the world. Then we have this basic definition. It's an offering or a contribution. But when you begin to mine it a little bit more, you quickly see that there are 4 distinct characteristics of a gift that separate it from other words like bent or strength. So it's an absolutely unique ability. You do it in a way that no one else on the planet does it. It has to be freely given. You can't be coerced. You have to give it from a place of generosity, not a place of control on your part. And it can be for the benefit of another living thing. So that's really important, because most often we think of gifts as human to human exchange, but you can give a gift to a plant, to a tree, to your dog. You can give a gift to any other thing that's living. And of course, you know, that includes stones. It includes anything that's alive on the planet and in the process of changing and transforming. So the simple distinction between skills and strengths, or some of the other words, is that a skill is something you can do. Skills always drain your energy, and you don't make a direct connection between this skill and the purpose of your life. A gift, on the other hand, is something you love to do. You can separate passion. You can separate, you know, in any words that show a higher than usual attraction and a feeling state when you're doing it. Gifts increase your energy, except it's important to know that all of us, one of the fatal flaws in gifts is we love them so much, even if we're unaware of them, that we tend to overgive them at the expense of other things we're doing, and then we begin to burn out. So I work a lot with helping professionals of all kinds who are really tired and a little crispy around the edges. And I've begun to believe that the primary reason isn't too high of caseloads or working too many hours. It's really overgiving of the gift that's causing the exhaustion. And you can connect it to the purpose of your life. You can make a direct connection. So one of the things about gifts I think that's important, I've found important for me to remember, is that there isn't a particular thing that you do in the world that is a gift for everyone. You know, a simple example is somebody doesn't like driving very much. It's a skill to them, but to somebody who races professionally, race cars, it's a gift. So there isn't any particular act a person does in the world that's a gift for everyone. It can be a skill or a gift, depending on your definition. So when you get even further into the idea of gifts, you discover there's 3 kinds. There's just being with another person, being present. There's gifts of material goods, stuff. I loan you $5 for lunch, or my car to run downtown to pick up something. And then there's gifts of abilities. And there are 5 different clusters or buckets or baskets of gifts of abilities. I won't go into describing each one of those, but the one on the right, the passage, is the one we're really talking about when we talk about a core gift, because core gifts are always tied to passages in your life, to difficult events. And whatever the specific thing you can do better or believe in more, it can be a value that you hold more strongly, a life principle, or it can be something you can actually do better as a result of going through that story in your life, is a passage gift. And your core gift is simply the passage gift that you've gotten from the most significant suffering you've known in your life is your core gift. And that's why when you ratchet through this entire basket of all different kinds of gifts, you get to this passage gift, and it gets to be the most fundamental, the most motivating, the most cause of both blessings and difficulty in your future life. So we really focus on that one when we're trying to work with someone. Then I'll end the slides with that one. So I think the most profound thing for me about the world of coaching is that in most of the coaching models follow or erupt out of industrial revolution model. And by that, I mean, they start with an issue and work through that issue, which is a brand new way of problem solving. That way of problem solving is not very old in the world. The more ancient way of problem solving, if Daniel's trying to change something in his life, he comes to me and he's, wants a new job, or he's looking for a life partner, or he's having a problem with his kid, whatever the issue is that you come to a coach for, the coaching profession now dives into that issue and works with it. An older way of working with that would Daniel would come to me and he would tell me a bit of his story. And then the next question would be, what's the purpose of your life? Why are you in the world? Because that's the primary problem solving methodology I'm going to use for working with Daniel. Because if Daniel's core gift is around using his imagination, then I'm going to use that approach. If Daniel's core gift is around creating structure and order to things, I'm going to enter his problem through the framework of structure and order. If his core gift is helping people feel like they belong in the world, I'm going to use that as the seed into the conversation with him. So I would do that because I know he'll be engaged in the conversation, because his psyche is attaching his current issue to what his core gift is, the reason he thinks he's in the world, plus that's attached to his suffering. So he's going to be highly motivated to resolve and move forward and transform when I make that entry into the conversation versus starting with the surface level issue. And I know that you all understand exactly what I'm talking about, but this core gift thing is an intentional way with someone. If you start with that as you get to know a person, then you keep coming back to that over and over and over in the coaching process. And the more issues a person has, and the more you keep going back to that, the more solid their path gets, the more motivated they are to change in different areas of life, and the more they're going to be feel seen and respected by you. So anyway, that's a bit about our frame on core gifts and why we tend to keep going back to it and using it for any significant change in a person's life. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely marvelous, because you've put language to something that I feel like I've been working with intuitively without language for a long time. And suddenly it just feels so clear and so beautifully articulated. And the clarity with which you linking, you know, the strengths and the gifts and how strengths can be exploited without that connection. And also, you know, that when an issue is attached to the core gift, that issue is then, I imagine, more just an obstacle to the expression of the core gift, and the motivation is so enhanced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. People get very motivated. Yeah.
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 And can you say more about when the issue and the core gift and the suffering come together? You said something about the suffering is attached to the core gift. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I think I can just tell you from my own life. So I don't know if I'm not sure this is the question you're asking, but let me try this. So growing up in my family, my dad was a domineering sort. And my experience of being around the dinner table or being around any table or being in the living room talking was that anytime I had an idea, I was a really creative young kid, he would always have a way to make his idea better or find something wrong with my idea. So my imagination kept getting pushed down as he desired to be more and more dominant in our family. So my core gift is helping people use their imagination to find new hope. It's very specific. And that results out of feeling hopeless sitting around talking to him at the dinner table. I have very distinct memories. And so that works in my life in a couple ways. If you were going to work with me, Ingrid, around a change issue in my life, then you would start from, what's the purpose of your life, Bruce? And I would say, well, it's all around imagination and feeling hopeful. And then you would say, regardless of what the question was, the issue we were working on, what have you imagined about why this is happening to you, Bruce? What have you imagined about the solutions? And you would focus the work with me around that. And so the way it works is that every time I feel seen by you, when I'm working with my imagination, what my psyche says is, see, Bruce, this is what should have happened to you around the dinner table. And so every time I connect that old story with this new possibility of imagination, I get stronger. It's not a very politically correct thing to say, but there's all kinds of stories from cultures around the world that refer to the suffering as the limp. And so when you're first wounded, then you walk slightly off kilter. But the more you give your gift, the more the limp begins to heal and the more balanced you walk in the world. You never get rid of the suffering, because the suffering is what propels you to act in the face of danger when it feels risky. Without the limp, you'd go, oh, that looks a little tough. I think I'll try and find something easier to do. But your psyche says, hold on here a minute. You went through this huge thing. There's this opportunity to heal. Are you going to go for it, or are you going to hide? And so our psyche is having this whole conversation about courage, no matter what the issue is. So the thing about the core gift process, we don't have a lot of time to talk about the actual process today, but the process does all of that behind the scenes, only asking positive lifestyle questions. That Brian's core gift comes out in these, they are throwaway questions, literally, but Brian's psyche is in the process trying to name this core gift. So I can ask him questions like, what's a job you never had that, if you could get it, would be so exciting you couldn't go to sleep the night before? Who's the person you respect and why? They are not depth-oriented questions at all. And none of them are about suffering. But the pattern of Brian's thinking reveals the primary issue that he's trying to resolve in his life, which is his greatest suffering. And so we can do this with high school kids who I'm never going to see again. I'm not going to open up big gaping wounds in a 16-year-old and then walk out of a classroom and never see them again. But 16-year-olds can do this in their own way without much skill in the interview process with each other and get pretty close to what their core gift is without having any suffering questions at all. So it's a positive approach that reveals life purpose and is healing without being in or wallowing in the wound. I don't know. Does that get at what you were talking about, Ingrid?
It gets at something very wonderful. Part of the question I was asking though also was, if a client comes to you with a certain issue in their current life, not necessarily the childhood narrative that gave rise to the wound, but, you know, a stuckness in their life somewhere, or disappointment, or whatever they're going through right now, how you link that to the core gift.
Well, an interesting thing about healing is that, you know, if you've been working for someone a long time, if you're a coach and you've been working for someone a long time and they've come with you with multiple issues, pretty soon you begin to see, here's this same fundamental thing showing up again as the roadblock. It's repeated in their life. And so that's the I believe how our psyches work is when we keep defining the main issue, whether it's a divorce, a new job, a problem with a kid, a problem with a spouse, whatever the issue is, our psyche tends to frame the fundamental core of the problem as the same thing. The same thing keeps coming up over and over and over again. And so that's the psyche's way of saying, are you going to tend to this or not? So if I don't know what that is, if you're my coach and I don't know what that is, it's just going to keep showing up for the rest of my life until you get at that. And when you know what that is, and you use the gift in that as the initial methodology for problem solving, and the person becomes aware of that, then they begin to move forward in their own life saying, here's that thing again that's showing up. Yeah.
I feel as though I'm hogging your time here with my questions, but I want to ask just one other thing, because most of us here work with the Enneagram, and there it really does help us to see, you know, our core issues around invisibility or autonomy or feeling defective or those core wounds. And it sounds as though, you know, your work finds the opposite side of that. I mean, in Enneagram terms, like the virtues or the holy ideas, and being able to transmit those and teach those to other people. I don't know.
Yeah. I think one of the, you know, Dan, so I think one of the primary differences that this core gift process identifies the one thing more than anything else. And the Enneagram is very useful in identifying a cluster of things. But that's one difference. I don't know, Dan, are you there still? Where's Dan? Can you, so what to you is that you know both processes. Can you comment a little about how the Enneagram is different than the core gift process?
Oh, it's a great question, and I think I can sense it, but I don't know if I can describe it. I think what the Enneagram does for me anyway is, and I'm not as skilled as many of the people on this call, is I identify some patterns of how we're showing up in the world, in different in different contexts. And for me, the way I've brought those two together is to take a look at what that pattern is and what it is that's underlying that may be what's trying to emerge, or what the gift is that's trying to emerge from all that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way my mind grasps it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Who else? I'm not very good at seeing hands. It's more like a dinner table conversation. Just chime in.
Bruce, if
Yeah.
I may, I'm wondering, so I get the idea here that, say, in a coaching context where there's a very specific problem, you can use this core gift as a, as you said, as sort of an entryway, perhaps a primary strategy. I'm wondering, does things sort of automatically work out in such a way that the problems you tend to encounter tend to fit well to the strengths or the approaches that you bring through the core gift? Don't you find that sometimes they just don't quite match up well, that there might be much stronger, more effective ways to approach a specific problem?
I think there's levels of intensity of problems. The core gift process may not be the best process if I'm trying to decide what I want to eat for dinner tonight.
Right.
But I think we're trying to reclaim something. You have such a beautiful name. Will you say your name to me?
Rickus.
Rickus.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. We're trying to reclaim something larger here. An older cultural idea that having a path is an important part of being a human being. And if you're not sure of your path, you're essentially wandering in the world, and you're like fluttering in the wind, and you keep finding these things that are troublesome, and these things that you perceive as blessing, but they're not connected together into a whole life. They emerge as almost separate events and occurrences and components in your life. And so we're saying it's important to be on a path. And when you make a decision in your life, to make sure it's connected to that path. And the advantage in that Rickus, is that if you're not on a path, the difficulties that you face are just bad shit happening to you, and you want to get rid of it, right? That's the Western medicine. Get rid of the suffering. The older idea in the world is to use your suffering.
Right.
And if you're not on a primary path, you make random connections between life choices and events. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But if you're on a path, then all of a sudden I can see how my marriage contributes to my work life in both good and not so good ways. I can see how spending my time with you right now might affect my conversation with my son tomorrow. That there's a connecting thread between everything. And there's something about the wholeness of that gets lost in Westernized and European industrialized models. Something got lost. And we're saying that part of the way we can make the world whole again is for us to become whole again and to see ourselves as being on a path. We're trying to make a bigger contribution than just solving an immediate problem, a difficulty in someone's life.
Good, thank you.
Bruce, me
Yeah.
again. Sorry, I'm just wondering if you've come across the work of Anton Antonovsky, because it rings so close to what you're saying here about the path. And I get the sense of a kind of narrative arc being so important in life, like the hero's journey almost. But Antonovsky speaks about kind of intelligibility and personal meaningfulness and manageability as three dimensions of what build resilience. And I'm just immediately seeing that if one has a sense of being on a path in the way that you're speaking about as well, living out a core gift, that there's an immense resilience that comes with that.
There is. You know, the modern science around resilience, if you really fish into it a lot, there's really only two ways to make resilience, to create resilience in you, Ingrid. One is to move your body. We know when bodies move, resilience is built. And the only other way resilience is built is through you know, what's called reflexive consciousness, meaning making. That the more we feel like we understand our world, the more resilient we feel. And the reason we feel more resilient is we feel safer. And so resilience is really tied to safety and body movement at its core. And so if I help Rickus to clearly define a path in his life, then he's going to feel like his life is more secure and safe because he's more sure of the direction he's going. And so there's going to be an innate feeling of both comfort and adventure at the same time in his life, because he doesn't know quite where he's going to end up, but he knows the main path he's on, and he feels safe because he now has an identity rather than just a random collection of capacities. So I think it's directly tied to Adamovsky. The problem is when you go out in the world and try and find processes that name that one thing, I'm not aware of any other it sounds fantastical, and this is not me speaking like we've created something great, but we haven't been able to find a process that actually names that one thing. As fantastical as that sounds, and we've had a lot of people looking. I would love to know of some, if any of you know of any, but we have not been able to find one. I'd like to compare and contrast and learn and alter our, I'd love some learning partners in this.
But I've used quite, sorry, carry on.
The only other methodology are, you know, discernment processes, you know, different kinds of prayer and meditation and discernment.
I was just thinking the closest thing that I've come across is called the flower exercise in a book called What Color is Your Parachute? I don't know if you've ever come across that, but the guy who wrote it, I think, was a deeply spiritual person. So it's got a lot of higher purpose and depth to it. And it can be quite a beautiful exercise. Well, I do it in a drawn out way with collage and all kinds of things built in to amplify, you know, but it really looks at your highest values, your sense of purpose, the things that you've enjoyed most in your life, your transferable skills. So each of the petals around this flower has got a theme, which you can then explore and reflect on, the kinds of people you love working with. So that's the closest I've come to really getting a deep sense of what am I doing here?
It's not quite as specific as what I'm thinking. He has a really interesting story. He avoided for 40 years you know, the What Color Is My Parachute, the book, he made millions of dollars. He avoided any conversation about a purposeful life path. Totally avoided it. And 3 or 4 years, or I'm losing track, I'm 70 and I've lost track of years. One of the last things he wrote before his end was, you know, I've made a grievous error here. I knew all along this had a spiritual component to it, and there was a purpose to people's lives, and I didn't have the courage to speak of it.
That's
And so
really interesting that you say that, because I picked that up from the book more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, he changed his whole approach towards the end of his life, saying he made a mistake, that he had bought into this idea of strengths, and he realized that it avoided the most essential question people are trying to answer. So he had a major turnaround in his approach, really late in his life. Yeah. Yeah. So it might be helpful, since you're talking about this pedal thing. I can show you. So these are in close to where I live, there were 13 youth suicides in a period of 4 months a few years back. 13 suicides in a community in a period of just a few months. And one of the solutions, one of the things they tried, that they worked on, was getting groups of young people together and working with, having them interviewing each other, trying to each name the purpose of their life as a way to build resilience and hope. And they gathered people, you know, that had developmental disabilities. They gathered gang affiliated youth. They gathered kids from the advanced class. They just mixed all kinds of students up together, and they spent time interviewing each other. And I have this one sample here I want to show you. Now, keep in mind, this is after a 30-minute introduction to how the process works. And then I sent them off in pairs. And these are the things they came up with. There's been no editing to this at all. So just take a minute and look at a couple of those. Just read them, because there's a few things in it I want to point out. Also, just notice these are 16 and 17-year-old young people. So I want to point out a couple things. One is one of the uniquenesses in the process is that there's always 2 sentences. The first sentence is actually the person's core gift, and the second sentence are the primary strategies they use when they want to make that gift happen. Many people have similar first sentences, but nobody in the world has the same second sentence. That's where the uniqueness is. And that uniqueness is really framed by their life experience and the sub gifts that they use to carry out that core gift. And so it's like in welding, if you want to get better at your core gift, you never focus on the core gift. You focus on the items in the second sentence and ask yourself, which one's most compelling to me now? Which one do I want to get better at? And in doing so, then your core gift gets stronger. So if you're coaching somebody, that's the question, because it can sound really big to focus on your core gift and say, how do you want to get better? But if you break down the strategies they use in the second sentence, now you've got some really specific things you can work on with the person that will result in the strengthening of their core gift. So the process produces without the facilitator is the observer and the facilitator of the steps. There isn't input from the facilitator in terms of analyzing the answers the person comes up with. They produce the entire thing. Everything that you're seeing were exact phrases that the person said during the process. And so the people who struggle with this process most are coaches, therapists, psychiatrists, spiritual guides, and writers. They suck at the process when they first start at it. I'm including myself in the batch. And the reason for that is that we all have depth-oriented gifts. And so we want to get in there and muck around, and we want to help the person process. We want to open up the world wider. And if you do that in this process, you destroy the process. The person is guiding and controlling the entire process, and your opinions about them, your perceptions of who they are don't matter. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Bruce, hi, Bruce. I just wanted to ask, what is the question you would ask to elicit the second response? So the first question is, what is your core gifts, or something like that? What is the second question you would ask?
Well, it's a simple process that it's a data reduction process. There's 19 questions. And when the person is done answering those questions, the facilitator picks out what we call the nugget, the things in all the stuff you're seeing in front of you right now. Those were things all said by the person in their answers to the 19 questions. And there's 5 steps, and in every step, you get rid of information until there's only, and the second to the last step is the person identifies out of the 4 or 5 things left, which one is their core gift. And then the way the process works is the remaining 3 or 4 things are the exact methods the person uses to give their core gift. It's hard to understand until you do the process once, but the process produces all of the information with no analyzing in the practitioner or by the practitioner. James is really interesting. He had moved, this was in Vancouver, Washington, the state of Washington on the west coast of the United States. James had moved from Oregon, from Portland, Oregon, across the river to Vancouver to organize gangs. And look at his gift. It's the perfect gift for a gang leader, bringing intensity, how things work. He wants to be huge, wants to be blunt. It's the perfect job description for a gang leader. During the day, we had a conversation that we've been brought up to think that gifts are positive things. Gifts actually don't have a value, they're neutral. And it's your character that decides whether you're going to bring love to the world with your gift or harm to the world with your gift. And it's your choice, and it's a continual choice. If I knew Ingrid's core gift and we were in a conversation, she could tell me multiple stories of times in her life when she's brought harm to other people intentionally with that core gift. Intentionally. Because it's our go-to thing, Ingrid. If you're angry or you want to get control over a situation, or you're tired of listening to somebody else and you just want it to go your way, you immediately go to your core gift to get control of the situation. And so Ingrid's used her gift for harm lots in her life, and she's used it a lot to bring love to the world. And so it is with all of us. Gifts are absolutely neutral capacities in a person. And so in James, he was a gang leader. He was actively organized people to go out and hurt other people. So we talked about that during the day that I spent with them doing this. And 3 months later, I got a phone call from one of the people in the mayor's office of that community, and said, I just want you to know that last week, James was elected the president of the City of Vancouver Youth Commission, who was working on positive improvement projects in our community. And he said it was because he never realized that his gift could be a good thing. He just had only been involved in gangs before. So it's, you know, it's a perfect example of the power of a gift to transform someone's life from out doing horrible things to other people. And all of a sudden, with that little bit of knowledge, I have this purpose, I have this intensity, it has to come out of me one way or the other. And he had just never considered it could come out in a loving way.
Bruce?
Yeah.
Just a poke maybe to spend some time talking about how this applies to your work with leaders and organizations.
Well, it's the blessing and it's the fatal flaw in leadership. I've led early in my career. I led 3 different organizations and employees loved me, and I sucked at being a leader because my gift is around imagination. And so I have no interest in organizing systems in organizations. I have no interest in programs that have been fully developed and are just maintaining themselves. I'm always about what's the new thing. And so I'm good at the visioning part of leadership. I'm not good at monitoring the structures and systems of reliability. And I know that now. I'm never going to lead a large organization again. It's not why I'm in the world. And so whatever a person's core gift is, it's the fatal flaw in their leadership. And it's also the most significant contribution they have to make to the organization. And so you tend to find people, the best people to find around leadership are people that have gifts around vision and imagination and consoling and supporting staff. They're not people who have gifts for structure and order, for reliability, for kind of policing systems, for making it. If Ingrid has a gift for you know, a leadership kind of oriented gift around visioning, she'll be patient with the people in her organization that have gifts for structure and order, that want to make a detailed plan about how to carry out this vision Ingrid's got, but she'll be frustrated during that entire conversation. She'll be thinking, oh, you people go do that. That's not really my thing. And so the leadership growth edge is for Ingrid to realize that she has a very small contribution to make to the whole organization, and that she desperately needs the gifts of everyone else in the organization to complement and enhance her gift. And so it turns organizations out of a hierarchical system and into a circular model where everyone's gift has exactly equal value and is necessary. And when one person's gift is gone, the group isn't whole. So it makes you question the gifts and contributions of each person in the organization. So you begin to see the comrades you're working with from a different perspective than the Industrial Revolution model of a hierarchy in an organization. And what it really does is separate positional authority from gifted authority, and they're 2 completely different things. They're both essential, but they're very different, and industrialized models want us to blend those 2 together, and they're not the same at all. So I was with working with a team. I can show you. Here's one example. Oops. This is a team I was working with in Canada. They took the time to identify each of their core gifts. These are on the wall in the room they meet in. I challenge you to name the director or the team leader of that team.
Not seeing your screen, Bruce.
Oh, interesting. Thank you for that. Now you can. This is an executive team. 11 people. Notice you can't tell who the leader of the organization is. These are on the wall of their room. And the way they run their meetings is they go down their agenda and they decide who has the primary gift to contribute to this current issue and problem they're facing. That person facilitates the conversation. And they move through their agenda, asking each person to contribute the specific gift they have to the problem that they're trying to resolve or the opportunity that they're trying to open up. So it's a gift-based problem-solving methodology rather than through positional authority, or rather, the bookkeeper doesn't have any more, a bigger contribution to make to the financial discussion that's taking place. They may have the final say, but if the issue is around two teams competing for resources, they're going to call on the person who has the gift for seeing the other side of things to facilitate that conversation during the executive team meeting, rather than the budget person, the budget leader, because it's their gift. And so it completely changes the dynamic of the decision-making processes that the executive team is using. And the reason why that matters is if I look at that person and say, John, you've got the core gift of seeing the other side of things. When I point at him, if I'm the team leader and say, John, would you lead this conversation? In the moment, what John's psyche says is, Bruce sees me clearly. I am being seen for why I think I'm in the world. And so that both lifts him up, makes him feel seen and heard and trusted by the group. And also, every time I ask him to lead that conversation, he gets better at understanding that core gift. So you keep wanting to return to people with the same core gift because they keep getting better and better and better at it. And then don't forget, every time that John leads that conversation, he heals. Even though that word is never spoken or said out loud, he's healing himself by giving that gift. So it has tremendous capacity to shift organizations towards belonging and towards inclusivity and all those jargon words that are so popular these days, diversity and equity, all really important things. But until someone really gets seen for their gift, most of that equity stuff is about justice, which is a very good thing, but it's not about belonging and it's not about gifts and purpose. And eventually, I think we have to get to that conversation. The justice conversation says, I got a right to have a seat on the bus. It doesn't say anybody's going to see me, respect me, love me, or value me. And one of the purposes of gifts is to encourage that conversation.
And how do you feel about something like the Enneagram, which at its best gives us a very good language for the essential qualities that people have, and some of these really beautiful core gifts? And it does link to childhood patterns, etc. I don't know how much you know about it, but
yeah.
How do you feel about a system that kind of offers some language from which people can find what they most resonate with?
That's beautiful. Yeah, this is a complementary tool to that. This is complementary to the Enneagram. Enneagram's complementary to core gifts. They're not arguing with each other. There isn't a conversation about which one is better. But I do think that this core gift process sifts and narrows the one thing. It's very specific about the one thing. And I think in terms of a path, that's an important concept. Yeah.
Can you show us some of the questions so that we can get a feel? I mean, these 19 questions are now completely intrigued. Can you give us a sense of what they look like and how to learn your process?
Yeah, I can show you. The problem with this is the questions are throwaway questions. You know, when I do this, people always want to see the deep questions. They're questions like, what's a food that's like you? What's a job you've never had? They're not depth-oriented questions. So people going, how can someone know the purpose of their life with a foolish question like that? And my answer is that your psyche is in the business of figuring this out. If I orient you that this is the purpose of our time together, your psyche immediately goes to work on it and is trying to figure it out. So I'll show you I can show you the steps in the process. I'm happy to show you anything you want to see. This will give you an overview here. There's some red notes up there that won't make sense to you, so you can get rid of those. But essentially, you're asking the person 19 questions. We do this with an online free Google app called Jamboard now. But this is exactly the same thing, describing what you do if you're sitting with a person. So what people do is they answer these questions. Then there's an easy process for the person to take those 19 answers and they organize them into theme piles. They always end up with 3 to 5 theme piles. It's just the way the process works. Then the third step, the person identifies which one in each one of those piles has the most power, they have the strongest reaction to. It doesn't really matter what you say, but their favorite out of each pile. So if the person has 4 piles, they'd end up with 4 nuggets, 4 scraps in step 3. And then in the fourth step, they identify which one of those is their core gift. And that's really the fantastical part that people have a hard time accepting, is when you get in step 3, your core gift is sitting right in front of you. It's already known. That's the disappointing part for practitioners, because they always want to help the person figure it out. The fact is it's already known and it's sitting right in front of them. And there's 4 questions in step 4 that you ask the person that help them to name which one of those is their core gift. There's a logic question. There's an intuition question. There's a sneakily worded childhood suffering question. And then there's an observer question. So what happens when the process is working right is the person keeps choosing that same scrap over and over again, no matter what question you ask them. And so we're really validating it from 4 different kinds of thinking and feeling processes. So when they keep saying from all these different perspectives, it's that one, it's that one, it's that one, it's that one, they know it's the one. And people always have a physiological reaction. The hair on their arm will stand on end, or they'll get a tear in their eye. They'll feel acutely seen. I don't trust the process if someone doesn't have a physiological reaction. And the reason for that is at that moment when they're saying, no, that's my core gift, and I say, I see you, in that moment, they think that the feeling response is, Bruce knows me better than almost anybody else in the whole world, and he sees me and he still wants me around. So there's this feeling of being clearly validated and seen. And then in the fifth step, there's just the two sentences that I previously showed you. My core gift is, and it's whatever they've gotten on that scrap they chose. And the second sentence is merely the remaining scraps in that step with commas between them and a period at the end. That's how those were developed. So it's a very easy process to go through that results in a very deep result. Is that helpful, Ingrid? You're okay? I see. I think I saw. Is there a Katie?
Hello.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, Bruce.
Katie is someone who's she's a coach in town outside London and uses this process. So she knew I was doing this and she said she'd stop by. So you have any? How does this work in your coaching, Katie? What have you noticed?
Wow, so many things. Hello, everybody. And how does it work? It feels like a really clear signpost. That's how it works for me. So in my own life, but also working with coaching clients, it feels like it's a source of clues as to what's going on that are otherwise really hard to see, I would say.
Hmm.
And when I'm working with people, I tend to encourage them to like have it close at hand a lot. And when something's challenging in life, maybe they don't feel very happy with their situation, or they don't know how to make a decision, or something comes up, it can be an amazing source of insight into what would be I don't know, a good direction to go. It's back to that path idea, I would say. I use that for myself in that way all of the time, and it's completely transformed how I feel about decision making, but also how I cope when things get difficult, because I can always find a way of taking something useful from it, rather than feeling, like you said on that earlier slide, things don't feel like pointless suffering in the way that they did before.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make anything any easier. I still keep getting myself into trouble, but when I do, partly I understand why more easily, but partly also I have a choice then. Is this the kind of trouble I want to get into because it matters to me or not? And if it matters to me, then I know you often talk, Bruce, about it being a source of courage. So, so there are situations which maybe aren't easy, maybe I would prefer not to be in, but maybe deep down I believe it's important to do that thing, and having my core gift statement handy makes it easier for me to see when it's that kind of a situation and I do actually want to persist. But because of the, I came late, my apologies, so I don't know if you've talked about this, but because of the flip side of your core gift, the fact that you can easily overuse it without knowing what you're doing, also having my core gift statement handy is a really good way of noticing when maybe I'm doing something that's counterproductive that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, because it's just so much how I see the world and interact with the world that I don't always think, is this the best way to show up? So it gives me information and choices that I wouldn't have if I didn't have it.
Katie, can I ask a question? Thank you so much for that. Do you find that identifying the core gift in some way restricts or boxes a person and closes up rather than opens up the person's contributions to a situation? You spoke of overusing the core gift.
Oh, I see.
In
Yes.
terms of, you know, the model of unconscious incompetence going to conscious or unconscious competence, and then reflective competence, where, you know, if you take things for granted because, you know, you're so good, and so the expert bias steps in. Do you find that could also be the danger of this kind of approach?
I think if you don't know your core gift and you don't know what you're likely to overuse, then I think that limits you. I think if you do know your core gift and you know, you have a choice then about whether you're a good fit for that situation. But also if you can see that your style, if you like, your default style isn't a great fit for the solution, then it invites you to do something different. So I would say it opens things up rather than limiting things in any way. That's my experience, but I know Dan and Bruce probably have a lot more to say about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that for me, knowing my core gift has never made things necessarily easier for me. I think what Katie was talking about is there's a signpost, right, that I can always return to that allows me to summon my courage to step into things that are important to me. Whereas before, because I didn't realize it was my gift or something that was trying to emerge into the world, it would stop me because all I would have was fear over whatever transactional processes that I was going to get involved with. If that makes sense.
This is Olivia, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. Thank you all so much for contributing to it, and to you, Bruce, for your work. I've done a bunch of work in personal branding, and even though I'm not particularly, I don't particularly care for the naming of personal branding. It's similar in the way that the process that I was certified in and use comes up with very similar statements that you showed, Bruce, because it doesn't translate into a career or a job or a role or something like that. It really emphasizes kind of the way you show up, I guess, in the world. And so I don't know if you're familiar with any of those kinds of processes, but it feels a little bit similar, and of course, like to the Enneagram and strengths. But there is something about the wording that we get when you write a personal brand statement that feels really similar. I think one of my questions to you and maybe the group, and particularly those who know the core gift process, is how do you invite clients into that very big question? It's a big, big question for people. Why am I in this world? And it's so big. And I think about it, whether it's for leaders or a gang member or anyone, right? But like, how do you really kind of create that space to explore such a big question?
Well,
go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, for me, there's instances where we're talking about core gifts and somebody is interested and wants to go through the process, which leads down a whole path by itself. With others of my clients, after working with them for a period of time, you get a sense of something about them, something that they bring to the world. And it leads to a conversation about, here's something we might explore to help you capture that more, I don't know what the word is, but to get a sense of it out here in the world, to make it object in some way. I've never had anybody be resistant to it or afraid of it. I don't think many people truly understand when you're giving a gift interview until they're through it. There's this magical thing that happens. You're going through all these questions, you know, you're getting through the little parts of this. And when you get to the end, there is this connection between you and the person who is doing the gift statement. And there's it's bigger than an aha. And Bruce was saying the physiological response that people have, you can see the transformation in their faces, right? But it's totally not answering your question, but it's also the same for me, like branding. I'm familiar with a little bit with that. The same is true for me with vision and mission statements in organizations, where people come up with a vision and mission statement that is just this thing we put on the wall that has no particular meaning for them. On the other hand, when you involve everybody in the process, when you're providing a process that allows them to express what's important to them in the work that they're doing, and you bring that together, when they see it on the wall, it's theirs. And it has meaning for them. And it's the same way my gift can be this thing I have on the wall, but it may be the back of my head that I go to when I need that inspiration.
Thanks, Dan. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Hey, Libby, just a quick comment. I've been working for 6 months or so with a really well-known branding person in Los Angeles, and who is producing, it's like you said, similar kinds of things. And the missing link for her is she said she always had this sense that this drive the person had, this personal brand, that it was connected to some difficulty, but she didn't really have a way other than sending them to a therapist to make the connection between this life difficulty and this driving urge they had to bring this brand into the world. And so she's started to use this core gift process because it makes that direct connection without a deep therapeutic process.
Interesting. That's so interesting. Yeah, because it gets back to your original talk about the wounding.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, Bruce?
Yeah.
There's just kind of a few minutes left that I see. And so I wonder if you maybe would want to show the folks your website and talk a little bit about your offerings.
You mean because my gift is not marketing, Dan? Is that why you're stepping in and moving in for the kill on me here at the last moment?
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I'm not good at that kind of stuff. So we do it's coregift.org. It's pretty explanatory. There's 12 different things that we do, and they're all, I think, really well explained. And we offer them at various times during the year, 12 different courses. They're all related to gifts. In different ways, shapes, and forms. But really our signature is this thing we call Core Gift Discovery Master Facilitator, and we do it every 3 months or so. There's one in August sometime. You can find it on our website under Core Gift Master Facilitator, coregift.org. And we haven't I haven't posted anything or advertised it in any way. So we only take, I don't know, it varies, but I try and assemble a group of at the most 10 people. It says 12 on the website, but it's just too many to really do a lot of coaching and for people to have really in-depth conversations. So this process tends to attract people who like deep conversations. And one of the things that they like about it, in the end, they say, is giving up the idea that knowing life purpose has to be a depth-oriented conversation, that's what keeps a lot of people away from it. And the attachment that all of us on the screen have to depth-oriented conversations, I think, makes at least I can speak for myself, my initial reaction of how could something that looks so easy on the surface produce something like that? And so we kind of revel in that. I really love that idea because it fits with the idea of gifts, that Andrea's gifts are on the surface of her. This is an ancient idea, trying to be seen and used by the other. They're not deep inside of her. That's a brand new idea, that what's most important is deep inside of us. Therapy is less than 100 years old in the world. The older idea is that Andrea's gifts are on the surface of her, trying to be seen and used by the community. And the deeper I go into her, the more shrouded and clouded her gifts get. What is most obvious and most useful is right on the surface. And this process adheres to that idea and makes use of it in the world.
One of the core needs I think we all have as human beings is to be seen.
So anyway, it's a big thing. Come if you're interested. It's a really great it's 2 days. It's a really great 2 days. I'm just realizing it's not very conducive to your time zone. I knew that, but I forgot it in the moment. So it would be like a 4 p.m. to midnight for you. Katie and I are going to do, you have to find out how strident you are about gifts to show up. So, but I just did one in Australia from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. So I've done my share of suffering around workshop stuff. So
There's also a number of resources on the website that just might pique your interest and things you can explore this a little bit further as well.
there you go again.
That's what I was going to ask you again. That's what I was going to ask you. I've just gone through your website. There's a number of books and articles and references. Which one would you suggest you start with first, just to get an overview of the kind of work you do?
Boy, one of the things that we've really tried to do, Brian, is not make this a secularized approach in terms of a kind of main resource thing. What we've tried to do is pull from all kinds of different psychological and spiritual and cultural, anthropological traditions. So we're not seen as coming from one thing, so no one feels left out. So I can send 4 things to Ilse, and she could send it out to the group. My tendency is to that cabinet behind you is full of gift related books and research and articles from many different traditions. Yeah, it's too late to show you anything right now, but I can send out a few things that were really instrumental in helping us get to where we've gotten with kind of a universal view of gifts, so we can go into any kind of cultural situation and work with people.
Hi, sorry, I have to walk away to talk. Bruce, I just want to say thank you so very much. That was incredibly interesting, intriguing, and maybe what we can do is get a group of South Africans together and you can give us a course that's time friendly.
We could do that.
I also want to say that I will be posting the recording, and I will get all the resources from Bruce and put those up as well, the slides and the 4 things we were talking about.
Great.
So
Thank you so
thank you
much,
everyone for joining us, and thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, sorry for your frustration, and I know you want to be seen and you want to be heard, and your electronics aren't cooperating. So thanks for sticking in there, Elsa. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce. That was great.
Yeah,
Really
wrapping it
interesting.
up. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye.
Nice job, Bruce.
Thank
And
you.
Dan, I wanted
Yeah.
to say thank you too for stepping in so brilliantly.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Did a much better job than I would have.
Well, we would have done the job differently. That's all.
That's
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
you guys. Okay, talk to you
Okay,
later.
Bruce,
Bye.
have a great trip.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Oh,
Going in
yes,
the morning.
enjoy that.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.